what if the reason your homemade bread feels like basically a dense, heavy brick has absolutely nothing to do with your recipe?
Yeah, that is a tough realization for a lot of foam bakers.
Right. Like, what if it has everything to do with just a single degree of temperature? Welcome to today's deep dive. If you're the kind of learner who is always looking for the smartest, most efficient way to master a complex skill without, all the endless, frustrating trial and error, well, you are in exactly the right place.
You really are, because it's a fascinating topic. Historically, baking bread has been treated as this mystical, almost temperamental art form.
Oh, totally.
There is this baked-in assumption that you need years of intuition, a sixth sense for what the dough is feeling to actually get it right.
Exactly. You mix the flour and water, and then you just kind of cross your fingers and hope the kitchen gods are smiling on you that day.
Right, yeah.
If there's a draft in the room, or if it's, I don't know, a little too humid outside, your beautiful loaf turns into a doorstop.
Right.
But the stack of material we are looking at today centers on a system called D'BakerAid.
And their whole approach is completely different.
Right. Their entire mission is to take that anxiety-inducing guesswork out of baking and replace it with absolute lab-level precision.
And they're claiming a 100% success rate, which, in the world of baking, is an incredibly bold, almost unheard of statement.
I mean, let me just set the stage with the sheer scale of the numbers we're looking at in these sources. They've got over 30,000 users worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah, and those users have baked more than 500,000 breads, giving the system an average rating of 4.9 out of 5.
That's a massive sample size.
It really is. But here's the statistic that made me completely stop in my tracks. They promise perfect dough in exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes. Or 2 hours if you're making pizza dough.
Which is wild.
If you've ever spent an entire Sunday anxiously waiting for dough to rise, you know that sounds like science fiction.
Oh, absolutely. It completely upends the traditional timeline. They are claiming to save home bakers 3 to 5 hours per bake.
3 to 5 hours.
Yeah, simply by removing all those chaotic environmental variables from the equation.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I really want to know exactly how a system sitting on a kitchen counter is shaving hours off a biological process that has supposedly required immense patience since the dawn of civilization.
Well, to understand that, we really have to look at the first critical bottleneck in baking, which is, the very beginning of the bread's life cycle, waking up the yeast.
Yes, the yeast. I always think of yeast as this incredibly demanding, finicky diva sitting in a backstage dressing room.
That is a great way to put it.
Right. Like, if the room is 1 degree too cold, she refuses to come out. If it's 1 degree too hot, she throws a fit, exhausts herself immediately, and completely cancels the show. You have to get the environment absolutely flawless for her to perform.
That is actually a remarkably accurate analogy for single-celled fungi.
Yeah.
And that is exactly where the science begins here. What's fascinating here is how the D'BakerAid handles that exact biological problem with what they call their Shurdo system.
The Shurdo system.
Right. The very first step in their process is a dedicated 35-minute yeast fermentation phase. And they're achieving what they claim is up to 90% tighter fermentation temperature control compared to your traditional method.
90% tighter. That is, wait, let's break down the why here, because I've stared at those little packets in the grocery store.
Oh, the active dry and instant ones?
Exactly. Active dry, instant, or even that block of fresh yeast in the refrigerated section. To me, it's all just, beige powder or paste.
Sure.
But this system supposedly has 3 specific separate programs for dry, instant, and fresh yeast. Why do they need entirely different environments?
Because biologically, they are in completely different states of existence. Let's look at active dry yeast first.
Okay.
It consists of dormant yeast cells surrounded by a thick layer of dead cells.
Oh, gross, but okay.
Right, so it requires a very specific warm temperature bath just to dissolve that dead outer shell and wake up the living cells inside. Instant yeast, on the other hand, is milled much finer and is highly porous.
So it reacts faster.
Exactly. It absorbs moisture instantly and wakes up very aggressively. And then fresh yeast, that is a block of highly active, fully alive, but highly perishable organisms.
Oh.
They need a very gentle, specific temperature to coax them into rapid reproduction without shocking them.
Oh, so if I just toss warm tap water on them, which is, by the way, what every recipe online says to do, I'm basically rolling the dice on whether I'm freezing them, boiling them, or actually waking them up.
Exactly. You are guessing. And this is where their hardware comes in. The system uses a smart hub with a 3-inch TFT touchscreen to manage all this.
Oh, a touchscreen on a bread maker.
Yeah, But it's not just a bread maker. You do this fermentation phase in their dishwasher-safe Triton bowls, and the system monitors that claim of plus or minus 1 degree Celsius in temperature precision.
Plus or minus 1 degree. That seems almost too specific, doesn't it?
Well, in a biological organism like yeast, a single degree dictates its entire metabolic rate. If the temperature is off by just a few degrees too cold, the yeast is sluggish.
Right, it just sleeps.
Yeah, it doesn't consume the sugars fast enough and your dough doesn't rise. But if it's just 1 or 2 degrees too hot, the yeast goes into absolute overdrive.
Like giving a toddler espresso.
Exactly. It rapidly consumes all the available food in the flour, burps out massive amounts of carbon dioxide chaotically, and then completely exhausts itself before the bread even makes it to the oven.
So it burns out before the grand finale.
Precisely. By optimizing the activation temperature to the exact degree for the exact type of yeast you're using, you hit the perfect metabolic window. The yeast wakes up comfortably and starts producing carbon dioxide on a strict, predictable schedule.
Which leads to a better rise.
Exactly. That predictable CO2 production is what eliminates what the material calls inactive yeast failures.
Yeah.
You are building a stronger dough structure and a richer aroma from minute 1 simply because the fungi are operating at peak biological efficiency.
So you're giving the diva the exact room temperature, lighting, and sparkling water she requested in her rider.
Pretty much.
Okay, so the diva is awake, the yeast is actively burping CO2, and we move to step 2, the dough proofing. According to the timeline in the sources, we just spent 35 minutes waking the yeast, and now we move seamlessly into a 45-minute dough proofing stage.
Right.
But I have to push back here.
Oh, go ahead.
I get that temperature matters for waking up the yeast, but let's talk about the actual flour. Whole wheat flour is famously stubborn. It's full of sharp little bran particles that literally shred the dough's internal structure.
Yeah, it can be a nightmare to work with.
It's like trying to build a hot air balloon out of sandpaper. Keeping a bowl warm for 45 minutes doesn't magically fix the sandpaper. So how does precision actually solve the structural problem of different flours? Does the machine actually know what I put in it?
That is the exact trap of traditional home baking, and it's a really brilliant question. You absolutely cannot treat all flours the same.
Right.
The D'BakerAid system doesn't just, warm the bowl. It alters the time and temperature curve based on 4 specialized proofing programs: white, mixed, whole grain, and sourdough.
4 different programs just for proofing.
Yeah. And it does this to manipulate the chemistry of the gluten network.
Okay, break that down for me. What exactly is the chemistry of the gluten network?
So when you mix flour and water, 2 distinct proteins in the wheat, gliadin and gluten, bind together to form gluten.
Gliadin and gluten. Got it.
Think of gliadin as the protein that gives dough its plasticity, its ability to stretch, and glutenin gives it elasticity, the snapback.
Okay.
Together, they form this 3-dimensional web that traps the carbon dioxide bubbles being produced by our yeast.
Right, the balloon trapping the air.
Exactly. Now, to your point about whole wheat being like sandpaper, those sharp bran particles will literally slice right through your beautiful gluten web if the dough isn't hydrated and softened properly.
And then your balloon pops and you get a brick.
Exactly. So a program tuned specifically for whole grain doesn't just blast it with heat. It holds the dough at a highly specific, stable temperature that encourages enzymatic activity.
Enzymatic activity.
Yes. Specifically, enzymes called proteases begin to gently break down and soften those sharp bran particles over that precise 45-minute window.
Oh. So it's not just keeping it warm, it's a precisely timed enzymatic bath. It's softening the sandpaper so the balloon doesn't pop.
Exactly. When you keep the proofing environment chemically optimized for the specific grain you are using, the dough achieves a much more complete proof. The gluten network develops without tearing.
Which means a better loaf.
Right. That is how you get a consistent rise, full volume, a lighter crumb, and deeper flavor, even with notoriously difficult whole grain flours.
And from a purely human perspective, you completely eliminate that terrible anxiety of endless checking. You know, the feeling poking the dough every 10 minutes?
Oh, a constant hovering.
Right. Wondering if it has doubled in size, worrying that if you look away for 5 minutes, it's going to overproof, collapse on itself, and turn into a sad puddle. You just let the programming do the 45-minute biological math.
It fundamentally changes the psychological experience of being in the kitchen. You move from stressful guessing to calm reassurance.
Okay, so we've woken the yeast perfectly, and we've built the architecture of the crumb by softening the bran and optimizing the gluten network. We have perfect dough.
We do.
But, as anyone who has ever baked knows, the oven itself is where dreams go to die.
Sadly,
You
yes.
can have the most beautiful dough in the world, and the actual bake can ruin it in 20 minutes. Which brings us to the exterior finish. Here's where it gets really interesting.
The bake. The final and, honestly, often the most violent hurdle.
The sources introduce this component called the de-steamer oven humidifier.
Mm,
But listen, almost every baking blog on the internet tells you to just, throw a cast iron pan of boiling water to the bottom of your oven, or to aggressively spray the oven walls with a water bottle.
right, the old ice cube or spray bottle trick.
Exactly. It creates a bunch of steam. Why on earth do we need a dedicated electronic gadget to make water hot?
Because throwing a cup of water onto hot iron is, once again, introducing chaos into a process that demands precision. It gives you a burst of humidity that vanishes in 2 minutes.
Okay.
To understand why we need calibrated steam, we have to talk about the physics of what happens the second your dough hits a 450-degree oven. The text highlights a concept called oven spring.
Right. Oven spring. That final explosive burst of rising that happens in the first few minutes of baking.
Precisely. When dough goes into a hot, dry home oven, the extreme heat causes the gases trapped inside your gluten balloons to expand violently. But simultaneously, the dry heat of the oven is rapidly drying out the surface of your dough.
Let me guess, it's like a sponge. If a sponge dries out completely, it turns into a rigid, hard cage.
That is exactly what happens. The surface forms a hard, dry crust. And once that rigid cage sets, the bread cannot expand anymore, no matter how much the gases inside want to push out.
It is totally locked in.
It's locked in. What controlled, sustained humidity does, what this de-steamer is engineered to do, is continuously coat the surface of the cold dough with a micro-layer of condensation. It keeps the sponge wet and flexible.
So the balloon inside can keep inflating for a much longer period of time before the crust sets.
Yes, but there is a second, even more crucial chemical reaction happening on the surface, and this is why a simple pan of water just doesn't cut it.
Okay.
That micro-layer of steam causes the starches on the surface of the dough to rapidly absorb water, swell up, and burst. This is a process called starch gelatinization.
Starch gelatinization.
Yeah. It literally creates a thin, glossy gel over the entire surface of your bread.
Oh, wow. And then what happens to the gel?
As the bake continues and the moisture finally evaporates, the oven heat triggers the Maillard reaction.
Right, the browning process.
Exactly. That gel layer roasts and caramelizes, transforming into a brilliantly shiny, blistered, crisp, golden crust. Because the steam was calibrated and sustained, you get maximum oven spring for a lighter interior and a perfectly gelatinized exterior.
That is incredible.
You are effectively transforming a standard, wildly fluctuating home oven into a $10,000 professional bakery steam oven.
That is wild. It's the difference between just making the air wet for a minute and actually using steam as a chemical catalyst to alter the surface of the bread.
And that absolute scientific control is the through line of this entire system. From the metabolism of the yeast to the enzymatic softening of the proof to the gelatinization in the bake.
Which really brings us to the human impact. Now that we understand the deep mechanics of this three-step process, we have to look at who is actually adopting this technology, because the user testimonials in these sources cover a wild spectrum of people.
They really do.
On one hand, you have an artisan bread hobbyist named Ollie J., who literally calls the D'BakerAid a fear-killing device.
Fear-killing. It's such a powerful phrase because it acknowledges just how intimidating traditional baking is.
Exactly. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have Miriam S., who describes herself as a novice home baker. She says she uses it as a quiet lab assistant to test hydration levels and dough strength in perfectly controlled conditions.
So it's helping absolute beginners isolate variables and learn the science without just constantly failing.
Right. But the sources also highlight some major health claims tied directly to this technology. They cite a 35% better digestibility in what they call NutriSafe technology. How does precise proofing actually relate to human digestion?
It all comes back to the biological work the yeast and enzymes are doing during that 45-minute proofing window. Wheat contains a compound called phytic acid. In the human gut, phytic acid acts as an anti-nutrient.
An anti-nutrient.
Yeah, it binds to essential minerals like iron, zinc, and calcium, basically preventing our bodies from absorbing them.
So it locks up the nutrients so we can't even use them.
Exactly. But wheat also naturally contains an enzyme called phytase, which breaks down phytic acid.
Okay, convenient.
But the catch is that phytase is only activated in a very specific, warm, acidic environment over time. When dough is fermented properly and completely without the rushed, uneven temperatures of a drafty kitchen, the phytase has the exact environment it needs to dismantle the phytic acid.
Oh, wow. So by perfectly controlling the proofing temperature, the machine is essentially letting the enzymes pre-digest the harsh compounds in the bread before you even take a bite.
That is exactly what is happening. It breaks down the complex starches, neutralizes the phytic acid, and unlocks those bioavailable minerals. So that is their NutriSave claim, 100% nutrient preservation.
That makes so much sense.
We see the real-world impact of this reflected in a testimonial from a user named Michael R. He notes that as someone with gluten sensitivity and digestive issues, the enhanced digestibility from this proper, scientifically complete proofing was actually life-changing.
Wow.
By completely controlling the biological environment, he could actually enjoy eating homemade bread again without all the severe discomfort.
That is massive. The idea that a perfectly timed proof doesn't just make the bread fluffier, but actually alters its nutritional profile in the human gut.
It really is.
And the validation for this technology isn't just coming from hobbyists and home bakers. The source material features a huge endorsement from Dudu Outmizden. For those who don't know the name, he is a master pastry chef, the founder of a boutique patisserie chain, and the author of 2 major culinary Bibles: Inspiration, Patisserie Design, and The Art of Patisserie.
A true heavy hitter.
Yeah. The man has over 30 years of deep professional expertise and 1 million followers on Instagram. He put this system in his professional test kitchen and stated it's the tool I never knew I was missing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains exactly why a master chef with 3 decades of sensory experience would validate a consumer piece of technology.
Right, you'd think you wouldn't need it.
But it's because precision is the ultimate goal at every single level of the craft. A master chef understands better than anyone how easily the chemistry of a dough can be ruined by ambient temperature shifts. They spend their entire careers and thousands of dollars on commercial equipment trying to control those exact variables.
Oh, I see.
So a device that automates that biological control isn't a cheat code, it is an optimization of the craft itself.
It delivers absolute consistency, whether you are baking your very first loaf and just trying to figure out what gluten feels like, or you are on your 50,000th loaf trying to perfect a crumb structure.
Yeah.
You need the chemistry to behave predictably.
And that predictability is what allows the baker to actually enjoy the process.
Totally. And the sources also briefly mentioned that this system is pretty comprehensive right out of the box. They throw in a $29 free accessories kit.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you get 2 aprons, a wooden Danish dough whisk, a wood gecko bread knife with 5 blades, plus a bonus stainless steel bowl specifically for chocolate tempering. So it really is aiming to be a complete hub.
It's setting you up for success.
So what does this all mean? For you, the learner listening right now, we've taken a journey deep into the molecular level of baking. We've gone from coaxing a finicky dormant fungus into an active metabolic state with exact degree precision, to timing an enzymatic bath that softens sharp whole wheat bran so it doesn't shred our delicate gluten balloon. And finally, to using the physics of sustained steam to trigger starch gelatinization and the Maillard reaction for a blistering golden crust.
It means that this deep dive isn't really just about analyzing a kitchen appliance. It is about the democratization of an ancient, highly technical craft.
Well said.
By understanding and controlling the science, this approach gives anyone the ability to master their ingredients. It allows people to save 3 to 5 hours of frustrating waiting and to drastically reduce food waste by essentially eliminating those failed batches.
That's just huge.
And it does all of that without sacrificing the incredibly tactile human joy of kneading the dough or the profound satisfaction of sharing warm, nutritious, homemade bread with your family.
It takes the chaotic math out of the equation so you can focus entirely on the magic of the final product. But it leaves me with one final lingering thought to mull over. When we take the unpredictable, chaotic variables out of an ancient art form like baking, when we replace the drafty kitchens, the sensory guesswork, and the crossed fingers with lab-level biological precision and micro-calibrated steam, do we lose a little bit of the raw, unpredictable soul of the craft?
That's a deep question.
Or, by completely eliminating the fear and the failure, do we actually free ourselves to become bolder, better, and much more creative artists? Think about that next time you step into the kitchen and stare down a bag of flour. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and keep learning.